What up, what up, what up? Welcome to another episode of New Orleans Basketball and New Orleans Network podcast. As always, I am your host, Raphael Rattler, joined by my fellow middle brother. What's poppin' with you, money? It's been a minute.
Yeah, man. It's been a minute. How's everybody doing, man? Things all good on this side. I can't complain. Enjoying, well, I guess you could say enjoying basketball. I mean, there's been a lot of bad basketball happening in the NBA, and this tanking thing is crazy, man. It is the combination of teams not being good, and then also having injuries to teams that may have had playoff and further expectations, such as the Pelicans and the 76ers, and then also having a generational guy at the top of this draft, but like also having a deeper draft where like there's a lot of good players at the top. It's just giving us this like everybody is just like quit. It is hard to watch, man. You see some of these guys, and it is literally I would love to see TNT play who he played for on some of these guys that are playing heavy minutes for teams around the NBA. But at least college basketball, right? The Final Four is happening this weekend, and at least you get that to look forward to. At least the college game is bringing the stars out and bringing the blue bloods. Obviously, all number ones in the men's side, and on the women's side, obviously you got Paige and those and stars like that, and the UCLA girls, and obviously Juju is hurt. But you got stars, right? You have stars, so at least you're getting it from some kind of way. But it's a rough watch for the NBA right now. But the playoffs are near, so this is kind of just everybody's going through the formalities of the end of the season, and going through. These are the true dog days of the NBA season. So, man, it's all good though. I'm appreciative. Again, I'm a hoop junkie, so I'll watch it regardless or whatever. And then also, real quick, I want to give a shout out to the St. All Purple Knights and my boy Brent for bringing the state championship home. I forgot to say it last week, but last show, but I want to give a big shout out to those Purple Knights off 2600 and my man Brent for being part of the coaching staff to bring that state championship back home the way it belongs. So, man, big shout out to them. But everything's all good on this side, man. How's everything on your side?
Everything is not all good. Arkansas was right there. The Elite Eight, it was right there, and they found a way to choke it. I don't think they would have beat Florida anyway, but in typical Arkansas fashion, they found a way. So they ruined my March. My March was full of madness because I had aspirational hopes for my college team. But you're right. This is an interesting time for me because my son, he's about to turn 7 years old, and he's starting to fall in love with the game. And so he's asking questions about players, and he's asking, why isn't this guy available? We turned on the game, we watched the Pistons. He's like, Cade Cunningham. I was like, oh, you know who that is? And he's like, he's not playing.
Play on my nephew.
Well, why is he not playing? And it's getting harder and harder for me to explain to him the point in time in the season where some guys are playing even though they're healthy, but some guys aren't playing even though they aren't healthy because their team is eliminated. But then some guys, their team's not eliminated, but then they're not playing either because they're resting up. It's hard time. So you can imagine for the NBA, like, how are you going to grab on to the fan that's not a junkie, that's not watching every basketball game, and explain to them why half the teams aren't trying right before the playoffs? Now, again, playoff basketball, it's hard to replicate that. And so that's what you're looking forward to. But they've got to do something about what's going on in the second half of seasons, because this is hard, like to your point, to watch. And so the Pelicans pulled the plug after beating the Charlotte Hornets, which give me your thoughts on that. Like, they shut down CJ and Zion. They didn't play that game anyway, but you knew that it was coming. On this last pod, we said it was coming inevitably. But Jose goes and wins the game and all but ruins the Pelicans' chance of getting a top 3 pick. But where do you see it on that? Like, obviously, as a fan, you're like, you want the team to win, but at the same time, like, you kind of want those lottery odds and things like that. Where is your head on that, just speaking objectively?
I mean, what else did you? It was a tank off, and Charlotte did. They tanked better. Miles Bridges was out there cooking the Pelicans.
The Pelicans sat quarters.
Yeah. Yes, they did. They tried really hard, but the Miles Bridges was out there cooking the Pelicans for 3 quarters. And then, they got the call from Charlotte back in the Queen City. It was like, you sure Miles Bridges don't have like a little toe, and you just didn't see him in the 4th quarter. So listen, it's hard. It's hard to throw games in the NBA, especially with these guys, competitive guys, just because like you want the team to lose, and I understand that that's probably in the best interest, and you get it. That's fine, whatever. But like, there's guys on this team that are not the best interest for them is not to lose and to be garbage on the floor and to look like trash. Because they might not be on the Pelicans, but guess what? They want to be on somebody else's team, right? And so they want to get picked up, and so they play, they play better. And they play, they put their heart out there, and they win the game, right? Jose beats the dribble, and the Charlotte Hornets kind of gave him the like a flight attendant to the room. And Mr. Brooks went ahead and did what he needed to do. So it's you could look at it both ways, right? Like, you want to see the Pelicans invest in their future in a season that's not going anywhere. Why not go out there and try your best to lose? I will not say that they didn't try to lose. I think they definitely tried. But at the same time, man, like, these guys are hoopers, and in the moment, and then in the heat of the battle, when you're on the court, trust me, if anybody has played any kind of basketball at all or any kind of competitive sports, you never ever go out with the intention to lose. And even if the goal in your head, in the back of your head, is to lose, you get them juices flowing, you get that competitiveness going, you get in that trench with your teammates and stuff, bro. It's hard to turn that off, and expect guys to just kind of lay down and let stuff happen. So the old adage is that front offices tank, players don't, and I think we kind of saw that with the Pelicans, against the Hornets that night.
Well, if you're a Pelicans fan, it should give you some type of condolence that just because you finish in the top 3, that doesn't mean you're going to get the number 1 pick or the number 2 pick or number 3 pick. Like, look at just last year, the Hawks jumped out of nowhere. And every year since they changed the lottery odds for the NBA, some team has jumped from 7 or 8 or whatever into the top 4 anyway. So how bad is it that, one, you are purposely trying to lose in front of a fan base you're trying to keep together while everybody is injured and on the shelf, but 2, you lose on purpose at home? Like, I feel like that's what a lot of teams are doing. But because I think of the unique aspect of New Orleans and what they want to see in the team, I think it's good that you put in these guys' heart, hey, you want to go win the game if you have a chance, right? Regardless who's on the court, you're going to try your best. So I think it's not a great look when you lose on purpose, even if sometimes it's in your best interest. But in the long haul, it doesn't always pay off. As you've seen, Detroit, who had the worst record in the league last year, didn't even finish in the top 3. So from that standpoint. So speaking of not looking good, Taylor Jenkins is out in Memphis. Ooh. Obviously, there was rumbles about, disagreements with him, his staff, the organization, and things like that. So in natural New Orleans Pelicans fashion, the next verbiage, the next conversation, the next storyline is, well, if Taylor Jenkins, who had 6 years in Memphis, 2 50-win seasons, 4 winning seasons in a row, had to deal with all the injuries, the same injuries that the Pelicans had to deal with, things like that. If he can get canned, do you think that the seat gets any hotter for Willie Green? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, Taylor Jenkins is the franchise leader and coaching wins in Memphis, and that is insane. There's conflicting stories about whose offense was who, and did he want to run the offense, and the job was there's just a lot of noise going on to that. I would say that I think Taylor Jenkins is a damn good coach. I think that he has shown ways to connect with players, as well as like do things on the floor that are unorthodox and work sometimes. As it relates to Willie, I think, again, the Pelicans, sometimes when people tell you who they are and what they want and what they believe in, it's best to just kind of believe them. I think that they look at the past, again, no matter how you feel about Willie Green and no matter what what's your personal feelings about what he's done, the last 4 years outside of this year when everything has gone wrong, he has on paper won more games, right? Each year. And again, in the year, I keep telling people about how like poetically injustice that there's got going on with the Pelicans, because the year that they do get a lot of Zion and a lot of Brandon Ingram and all of that, and they win 49 games, they have to be in the 8 seed and in the play-in tournament and things like that. But like this year, if you had 49 wins, you would probably be the 2 or the 3 seed, which is insane if you think about it. It is just the 1 year where they got everything together. Everybody else had everything together too. So of course that happened that year. But I do think that, you know, if Taylor Jenkins is someone that is available at the end of this season, I don't know if it makes Willie Green's job, you know, his seat hotter. Because again, he has a built-in excuse for the injuries. But I mean, Taylor Jenkins has shown, you know, to get wins out of whatever roster he's had on the floor, and you know, and if this was just a personality conflict or a philosophical conflict, and not that he's just not a good coach and that he's not connecting with the with the players. Then I do think I mean, at least like we talked about with listening to Zion, listening to offers for Zion, I think it's at least business to you know, hey, is this something you would be, you know, interested in, you know, and at least get a conversation going, just in case things don't work out with Willie Green, or if he, you know, and Taylor doesn't get hired. So I think he's a damn good coach. I think he would be a good coach for the Pelicans, but they have a coach right now. And Willie Green, and you know, for better or for worse, they've talked about how, you know, there's a guy, they've given him the extension. They've talked about how they believe in him and how and things like that, and giving him every opportunity to grow and things like that. So, you know, we'll see where that goes. But I do think Taylor Jenkins is a really good coach.
Right, I would agree with that. I also think these are two very different situations, right? Like, what do people typically say around the NBA? In order to win, in order to win successfully, at least for a sustained amount of time, you've got to have alignment. That's front office, coaching staff, and star player, right? More times than not. It seems as if in Memphis over the last couple of years, there's been a lot of dissentiment between the front office and the coaching staff, and obviously Ja Morant, who's seen a different offense being played that features him less, which naturally is not going to appeal to what he wants to do. Those are a lot of different communication. Whereas in New Orleans, last summer, the Memphis team asked them to get new assistants around Taylor Jenkins that were different from what he wanted to do. Last summer, New Orleans was like, Willie Green, you want to go get your own assistants, go get the assistants that you want to buy. So you have buy-in from that standpoint. All throughout the season, you've seen more and more Zion at point guard, and as his conditioning, what we'll get to, has gone up, you've seen the team buy into that. So in more ways than not, you've seen them connected from front office to coaching staff to star, versus in Memphis, it's been fragmented for quite some time now. So I don't think that those two things are necessarily the same. But in true fashion, let's say that the Pelicans do plan to build around Zion and do plan to go forward with Willie Green and give him another year to kind of have healthy pieces, as they keep mentioning, get healthy this summer and see where you are when you roll the ball out next year. And let's say that they don't seriously entertain any Zion offers this summer. As we watch these past 30 games, like it's been a ridiculous amount of games that have not mattered for the Pelicans so far this season. You're trying to see which one of these players are going to stick around. And if you're going to dive in to the Zion at point guard or the Zion business moving forward and almost double down versus find an escape route out, what does that look like? And what are the pieces around it? So my first question to you is like, is it a good plan to build around Zion? Due to lack of availability, we're about to see 6 full seasons and 0 playoff minutes. But then at that point, going a step further, is it a good plan to build around him as the point guard of the team and primary facilitator?
Yeah, I do. Yes, I think it is. Listen, you know, Zion has been, you know, and I would think he would admit it himself, has not lived up to whatever it is that people, you know, bestowed upon him coming into the league, right?
Stephen A. said a bust.
Well, I wouldn't go that far. I don't know any bust that's in the conversations with Wilt Chamberlain but whatever. So he has not been, fulfilled that prophecy or whatever it is that he, came into the league with. But what you can say about Zion is that when he's on the floor, he is very capable of being the best player on the floor, regardless of who's playing. And that's Jokic, that's Luka, that's Giannis. It doesn't matter. He has the ability to be the best player on the floor and it not be a shock, right? It's like Jamal Murray is the best player on the floor in the game. You're like, oh, he must have had an incredible game. Like if you told me Zion, the Pelicans played the Nuggets and Zion was the best player on the floor, you'd be like, oh, okay, well, that makes sense. Right. So it is very difficult, whether they're available or not. It's very difficult to find a player like that. It is just difficult to say at any given night, this guy can be the best player on the floor. It's very difficult to find that player. It's super difficult to find that player when you're in a market like New Orleans, right? Where you're not, the free agent market, haven't had a lot of history in going over the tax and spending this and blowing money this way. You haven't shown that. So trying to lure talent, to New Orleans, has not been, via free agency and anything, has not been the way to go. So now you have a guy that's in the house, right? Like you have a guy that's on the team that's locked up, with no outs, no contractual outs for a while. And so now you have this opportunity to have, a top whatever pick and bring this guy in, whoever this person is. There'll be a top end talent, right? If you have that top 4 pick, there'll be a top end talent. It is the best way forward for the Pelicans. If you're talking about being successful, is for this next draft pick to hit and be the star that you're talking about, but to have Zion as the head of this whole snake, this whole offense. And again, we'll go into, what that means about Zion, because I think the way people view Zion and the way he plays and the player that he is, I think we've been looking at it wrong. We've always talked about this. It's one thing to be the point guard on the floor, but as you build the roster, you're the small forward, you're the power forward, you're the, whatever the case is. But on the floor, you're Giannis, you're Tatum, you're LeBron, you got the ball in your hands. It's another thing to say, this guy is my point guard, meaning like we're building the team with him as the point guard, meaning like Ja Morant and Steph and Luka, and like these are your point guards. So everybody should be bigger, right? That should be your smallest player. And I think that's the way we need to start looking at Zion. And we'll get into that and what that means a little bit more. But I do think the best way forward for this team is to have Zion on the ball. You've seen it time and time again. And have guys who can play well off Zion, but can be like Trey Murphy and create offense for themselves and be able to function some offense around, when he's either subbed off the floor or when inevitably he's not available. But to have Zion as the fulcrum of this offense and the fulcrum of this team, I think that's the best way forward for the Pelicans. What up, Slade?
Right. I tend to agree. And again, like we've documented on this podcast, the likelihood that you get a talent like Zion, whether it's in this top 5 draft pick, whether it's over the next 5 draft picks, is low, right? If you're New Orleans and you're in this market, and to your point and I, it's like the light bulb seems to be coming on for Zion. You would hate for it to come on somewhere else in some other city when he's finally figured it out after you've done the hard work of getting there. The other thing I look at is, like, to your point, not just point guard, but primary facilitators. I look at Zion's on-ball numbers, like his assist percentage, which is basically the percentage of field goals made in comparison to the team that came from you. The only people that are higher than his 33% are point guards. Trae Young, Cade Cunningham, LaMelo Ball, Tyrese Halliburton, Luka, Harden. All those are point guards. The only 2 guys that aren't point guards are Jokic and LeBron. So when you look at that type of production versus usage and the ability to facilitate to other people, we've said this from the beginning. I never understood the throw it to Zion in the post and hope that he can turn it over his right shoulder and shoot with his left hand over and over and over again versus giving him the ball at the top of the key. But this brings up the second question that I have for you. Can his body handle it, right? Like the part of the reason why you haven't been able to see Zion just not available on the court, but also see the point guard Zion because it requires the most amount of energy out of you. What is the telltale story? If a star is killing you on one end, how do you attack them on the other end defensively because they don't have enough energy on that side? Well, with Zion, who plays a brand of basketball that's always up tempo, that's so physical, that demands so much energy, if you're not in the tip-top condition to be able to deliver on both sides, how are you going to play 42 minutes a night and go banging in the post over and over and over? So, like, you look at the season highs and the production that he showed so far this season with rebounds and assists and steals and blocks and everything you've seen so far. But the one thing that hasn't been the season high or his career high was the minutes, right? And I think that part of this back half of the schedule was figuring out, okay, this is Zion at his peak powers at 28 minutes per game. How do we get Zion at his peak powers at 30 minutes per game, and then 32 minutes per game, and then 35 minutes per game, and God forbid 40 and 45 and things like that? And I think that is that next piece of things for Zion. That is that next question. Can you handle being the point guard and having the ball come through you for an entire game and not just spurts that we've talked about? Conditioning, we've talked about that piece, like from Jose and Willie Green. They've talked about Zion knows this is what it looks like when Zion is Zion this summer. It can't drop off. You just got to build from here. And he knows it. They know it. The team knows it. The fan knows, the world knows it. So now it's kind of his own shoulders. What do you think about that? Do you think that he's figured out that, hey, in order to get me and in order to be me, it's got to be a different me?
Yeah, and I think the answer to that question, and you made a lot of good points. I think the answer to that question is twofold. Number one, I think it is incumbent upon him, right? It is 100% incumbent upon him. He has to understand the burden that he's carrying. Again, we're going into, this is year 6. Like we have to, at some point there's got to be some level of maturity and growth on your side. And I think you kind of saw that a little bit. I talked about this. I remember distinctly that Chicago game where the way he's playing now, is that second half of the season when he came back from the injury and everybody was like, oh, he attacked this rehab, a lot differently than he had. And I mentioned this in a podcast earlier. The way he was playing, it wasn't the same way we saw him playing. And what I mean by that is, and again, this goes to like the viewpoint of the offense, the viewpoint of Zion. When you are the power forward on the team, but you're charged with being the ball handler, your job is a little different than when you are the point guard of the team. And what I mean by that is he had to turn down, around screens and go downhill looking to score, if not to look to score, but because he's the power forward. He's the guy that also, if you miss, you got to be the guy to kind of rebound, and you in the center, right? If the center's being boxed out, you're the next guy up as the power forward. Whereas we saw some of these games where it was Zion and Trey and like Carlo and Eves, where he's the point guard and he's seeing bigger guys out on the floor, and you're seeing that, and like he's able to turn a corner and look to make cross court passes. He's turning the corner and looking in the dunker position, because now you have a center with Carlo space in the floor, and you got a center with Eves who can get the dunk position. You got Trey out there who can bomb away, and the way he was playing didn't make you as nervous as for the knee injuries, because he wasn't going into the lane and trying to jump between 3 and 4 and 5 people. The dunks that we saw against, like, the Trey Jemison dunk, he was coming down the court and it was just him and Trey Jemison. It wasn't him trying to finish over 3 people. And that's, you start torquing that knee a little bit, and that's how those injuries, those things happen. His injury against the Timberwolves was him dunking and landing on his back. It wasn't oh, here go the knee again. Oh, go, there's the whatever, the groin again. It wasn't any of that. And so he's kind of changed the way he's playing a little bit. And again, I liken it to kind of what Ja was talking about when he was like, I'm not dunking anymore, because you've seen that highlight. You've seen all of that. But he gets fouled, and Ja talks about how he doesn't get calls. And that stuff hurts when you landing and not getting foul called. I think Zion is starting to see a little bit of that. And then when you start putting him closer to that point guard position, you don't have to worry so much about the wear and tear on his body, because he's looking more to pass the ball and to get people involved and to be smarter on shots. You see him take more middies, you see him take more threes. So I do think he can get to that point where he can play for 35, 40 minutes in a game and be effective, and do those things. And again, you have other guys that, if need be, they can take some of that point guard responsibility for spurts off of Zion and just let him play off ball. But I think the majority and I think if you ask Zion and you gave him some truth serum, he would tell you that he's more comfortable playing on the ball. He talks about being a point guard and growing up as a point guard. He can play that and do that at a much easier rate now that he's kind of growing and maturing and understanding things about the game. I just think it's more about who you put him on the floor with and what does that do to his psyche. When he's out there when it's just him and Eves, and then you got all small people behind him, if you're asking him to initiate the offense as the point guard, then how could you ask him to also be the rebounder and also do this, that, and the other? It's much more difficult for him to do that versus, okay, well, now you have him at the top of the key. You have Trey and Herb over there, or Trey and DeJounte over there, but you got Eves and Carlo down there, or you got some kind of, him and Kelly, Eves and Kelly down there. You have a different mindset of when you're playing. And so I do think that he can do it. Again, I think it begins with him and his, tapping into what he's going to be tapping into this offseason, coming back in shape immediately, not waiting 20 games in. And then also how the Pelicans deploy him as that point guard and not just the power forward who initiates offense.
Right. The thing I look at is, I had a couple people tweet me and say, well, if Zion's at point guard, now how is he going to guard Kyrie and how is he going to look all these quick guards? If you paid attention to this season, Zion did pretty good against other guards, right? Because you can't use like the guards that try to body through you and go, you can't do that with Zion. And Zion has that unique skill set where he's both strong, quick, and fast, right? So it's not one of those things where he gets lost often on the perimeter.
Also, Herb Jones plays for the team. Next question.
That's also true. Right. And so when you think about, okay, if my offensive responsibilities are Zion at point guard, well, the best player on the other team is probably going to be guarded by Herb anyway, right? And so in those scenarios, you're doing the mix and match the same way OKC does, the same way Boston does, to say, okay, tonight, this is how we're going to make it difficult. And if you start cooking this guy, we got 4 and 5 and 6 and 7 other guys we can throw at you to give you different looks. And I think from that standpoint, like, I think that's the switch for Zion. You and I talked about, like, the thing I've been the most happy with from Zion's perspective in terms of what he's displayed this season is his mentality and his maturity, right? And how he's just kind of flipped the switch, to your point. I think the next thing comes from a quote that I think is interesting of who it comes from and who he's talking about. This time last year, March 28th of last year, Zion had a quote after a win over the Bucks. They asked him about how do you think, like, playing around Zion or around Giannis, even though he hasn't had a lot of opportunities because he hasn't been available. This was his quote. I thought I attacked the basket. He attacks with force. He gets to the free throw line. I think he missed the first few. Then he started knocking them down. He has a high motor. He's always on the attack. I love competing against him. I think that's the last step for Zion, the motor part, where every single play, I'm relentless. I can play the whole first quarter and come out in the second part of the second quarter and still have enough energy to keep going. I think the summertime is about figuring out how to tap into that piece of things. Because if you look at any numbers, any metrics, if you map out Zion's play of 28 minutes over 100 possession, he's in the conversation with Shea and Jokic for MVP this season. And so now it's about how do you get to that point and keep him on the court. You brought a really good point up earlier about how this is about, what can Zion do, especially with so many players entering rehab this summer versus training this summer. What can Zion do to build and who is put around him? Now, to your point, and David Griffin has talked about this, like, they're going to continue to piecemeal things together. And obviously Trey is a big a building block of that. Hopefully DeJounte Murray and things like that. But the question becomes, like, what changes to the roster are needed? if you're going to build around Zion, you and I have talked about this. Like, we talk about the OKC comparison. We talk about the Boston comparison because they're led by wings, and OKC is a little bit different where they're a super athletic team, 1 through 15, on their roster. Well, Zion's more of a Shea, but he plays more like a Giannis in that way. And the teams are built a little bit differently to supply. So let's just go by groups: center position, wings position, or guard position. When you look at the center position, obviously he's got Eves coming off a great rookie year that's about to come to conclude. Led the team in game. A guy who wasn't supposed to play a whole lot of minutes led the team in games started and games played so far this season. Kelly Olynyk, a midseason acquisition, who I think will stick around the team next year because he fits well so far. And then obviously Carlo Makovic, who's really come on this last month, averaging 10.6 rebounds in the month of March, starting to show some things on the offensive end. What do you think is missing there? What do you think is another piece to say this is how you maximize a talent like Zion Williamson?
Yeah, I think the center position, I think you have a good mix of. I think the guys that you have, the two young guys for sure, they need more experience. They need to get in the weight room. I think you have a pretty good mix there because you have Eves, who's a rim runner, rim attacker, a guy who can play in a dunker position, and a really smart basketball player. You have Carlo, who's more of the floor spacer, the European guy who can play the four as well next to Eves because of his ability to space the floor and, his passing ability and things like that. And you have Kelly Olynyk, which is the Canadian Swiss Army knife, can just do whatever you need at that point. I think the Pelicans would do well getting one other 7-footer, a tall guy who can knock down shots. I think if they can get a guy who can space the floor a little bit and play with a little bit of force, they don't need to be, the DeAndre Jordan dunking on people, but play with some force and play with the ability, to play with Zion, right? To have a guy on the floor like that, because whether it's Zion, whether it's DeJounte, whether it's Trey, whether it's this guy who, this rookie who comes in, and if he gets a chance to have the ball, you're going to have to play off that guy. You're never going to have an opportunity where they're going to throw the ball to the center position. JV no longer plays for the Pelicans, even though they didn't give it to him when he was here either. Anyway. But yeah, I think if they could get one other guy who can knock a 7-footer that can knock down a 3-pointer every once in a while, right? They don't have to be a knockdown shooter, but keep the defense honest. That'll be good, because I think between Zion's ability to get there and block shots, you've seen Trey Murphy get in the way and block shots, and obviously Eve's going to block shots. I think you're good as far as having guys to support rim protection. I would like for the 7-footer to do that, but I do think that you need to add some more shooting, and it needs to be in places where it can maximize the ball handlers you have, and having a guy that could come out and shoot upwards of 32, 33, 34% from the 3-point line as a big man. I think that'd be good. That'd be good to have.
Right. I tend to agree with you. I think that, we've talked about Ease Misi, and I think this is a really important song. Obviously, it's an important song for everybody, but I just think that there's so much untapped potential in Ease, and, the team has alluded to it so far. Yeah, he's kind of tailored behind some of the other rookies that are having better second half of the seasons from that standpoint. But at the same time, I just think that he's showcased so much from a player that was so raw that there's another level of offense. To your point, like, they need to get stronger. They got their feet underneath them as rookies. That confidence level for both him and Carlo Makovic, where they can be threats as well, I think is important. But I think the Pelicans agree with you. Look at what they've done with their 10-day contract. They just signed another center today, Kelly, to the team today. Before that, it was Mo Bamba, who can kind of space the floor and kind of rim protect. They're looking for another one as well, because again, if you watch the Pelicans basketball, you're not making it 82 games with no one being hurt. So as soon as one of Kelly Olynyk or Carlo or Eves goes down, you're right back to putting Trey at the 4 or Zion at the 4, and you're forced into that again. And so I think it's important that they get another big guy there. Now, let me ask you here about the guard position. You talk about the positions, and you talk about the role players around them and things like that. We talked about it on the last pod. The Pelicans have a ton of guards. I see it in the comments with Slade Smith. Obviously we talked about CJ McCollum and that big decision coming this summer. Is this something where they look to extend, something they look to go to the deadline is, something they look to make a move on, someone that they want to keep around? Who knows from that standpoint? Big question mark there. You talk about DeJounte Murray. He's going to miss probably the beginning of the season, a good chunk of it. You can't not build your team because you're waiting for DeJounte to come back. You still got to do things to supplement that. And I think this is so important because the question to you earlier, is it smart to build around Zion? I say yes because of everything you said and everything he's shown on the court. But also you need to build in contingency plans because he's shown you that he's probably not playing the majority of the game. So you need to have other options outside of, hey, Trey Murphy, can you go score? DeJounte Murray, you're going to be on the shelf for some months. Who is going to generate more offense? You look at a player like Herb Jones coming back from injury. Again, you want to see if he can get back to that 3-and-D type of mentality where he was sitting 40% last year coming off his contract. But also, is there another step to Herb where he can kind of create, like he was getting downhill, he was scoring in transition a year before? Is there some things you can do with Herb on the offensive side of the ball where he's also a 6'8" athletic guy where he can generate some offense on his own? Because I think this section, this wing section of guys, or these score section wing guard, this is where you're going to need another scorer for when Zion inevitably is not playing or someone else is not playing. What are your thoughts on the guards? Like, do you think this is one of those things where you got a lot, so you keep what you have, or is it somewhere you should be looking?
Yeah, I think the Pelicans have too many guards, and I think that it's funny because it's the Pelicans is not, they didn't make the same mistake twice, but they did the same thing twice, and I would be willing to bet that if you gave them true serum again, they would tell you that, both of these trades, they was like, damn it. The first one is CJ. CJ came to the Pelicans, did exactly what he was supposed to do. The $33 million, I bet you the Pelicans would have been like, I bet you we wouldn't, the extension we probably would have did differently. If you look at what we just talked about with Zion being the point guard, and you're about to have, another guy, whether it's Coop, who can be on the ball, whether it's Dylan Harper, who is a point guard, a 6'8", 6'7" guard, combo guard, but has the ball in his hands, whether it's Ace Bailey, who can create for himself, but is going to play more off the ball with Zion to start off and then kind of gain his game like Trey Murphy, gain his off the ball game, or it's VJ Edge or any of those guys. They're going to have the ball in their hands, and Zion as the lead facilitator, as the point that we saw, has gone forward. Is the way path forward to me. It is DeJounte. Listen, man, he came to the Pelicans and he did, he played well and he was starting to get his footing together. But I'm not sure that's like the player that you need right now if you're looking at, who's available for the Pelicans. Because right now you have Zion as, again, I'm considering Zion a guard. You have Zion. You have CJ. You have Herb. You have Jordan Hawkins. You have Jose. And now, honestly, like Alfred has shown that he should be able to stick around the way he can generate offense. And Alfred can give you 50% of DeJounte while DeJounte is out, right? When you talk about you can't wait for DeJounte to get back in, you have to keep the offense together. He's a guy that can do a lot of what DeJounte does, both offensively, meaning pass the ball, finding guys, getting guys available, and being a tall guard that can get in the way of other guards, right? And be a defensive, minutes. Obviously, he's not the decorated player that DeJounte is, but I'm talking about 50% of DeJounte while he's out. That's all you need from a guy like EP at the end of the bench. And so I haven't even gotten into Jose, and we talk about the leap that he took this season that's kind of been drowned out because of the injuries and the lack of availability of everybody else in the Pelicans record. There's just a lot of like ball handling guards on the team. And guys that's like, if everybody's healthy, there's just when you think about if the Pelicans are at their full power, and again, they never are. So even if you think about like the second guard and the third guard, the backup point guard and the backup two guard, or whatever the case is, like if Zion and CJ or Zion and Herb are your starting lineup, and you're still talking about, Jose and CJ as your backup, or if CJ's not there, Jose and Hawkins, that still leaves DeJounte and Alfred and guys like that. So you are deep. Brandon Boston, another guy, Brandon Boston. You have a lot of guards, a lot of guys that can do stuff with the ball in their hands. And so, it might be best to start looking towards, making Zion part of that guard rotation when you think about team building, and then start looking at wings and bigs to add to this team and take away some of these smaller guys who and ball handling, guys who need the ball in their hands at times, because again, if everybody's playing, it's hard to say, okay, we need, Zion out, Zion is out there and Trey is out there and Ace Bailey is out there. So how do you get like Jose on the floor, or how do you get, DeJounte when he gets back? How do you fit him in there? Who goes to the bench? Just a lot of questions. And if CJ is there, how, those questions, we already had those questions coming into the season. So it's just a lot of it's a glut of guards on the team. And I think the Pelicans, again, if you're being honest and looking at the team, I think it's best to start looking at how can we, consolidate some of these guard positions and move it and spread it out towards that wing and that center position.
Right. I agree with you. I don't think the Pelicans should be looking to acquire guards. There's just too many. Like the thing I look at, again, the league is getting bigger. They're going back to playing two bigs. Guards are 6'6", 6'7". I'm looking at this. DeJounte Murray, 6'4". CJ McCollum, 6'3". Jose Barrao, 6 foot. Jordan Hawkins, 6'5". Antonio Reese, 6'5". I think you need to you just got to get bigger as a team. And I think, to your point, like you talk about, hey, needing more shooting around Zion and need more guys that can catch and shoot. Well, nobody shot 40% from, Antonio Reeves is shooting 40% from three so far this season, but in a small sample set. But like guys like Jose and Jordan Hawkins and CJ McCollum and Trey, nobody shot 40% from three. And last year, the Pelicans were a top 5 3-point percentage team. What is the two differences? The star power on the court last year for Zion and BI and Trey Murphy was much different. So the quality of threes that these guys are getting is much different when Zion plays 30 games, right? And BI plays 18 games. Like when those guys don't play, yeah, everybody else's shooting percentages are not going to look as good. So I don't think it's not that you don't have the shooters. Because to your point, I think Jose is taking a step there. This is a huge summer for Jordan Hawkins. Like he's got to figure out his back issues and figure out how to get back into rhythm before he's forgotten about, to your point, as the NBA passes you along. But with CJ and you have a lot of guys that can catch and shoot at guard. So it leaves a big hole at the wing position, because to your point, okay, we haven't even talked about Bruce Brown, who's come along the past couple games, and the Pelicans have mentioned they want to keep around. Like these are all guards on the team. But then you look at the wings, and if you move Zion from wing to guard, the only wings on the roster is Trey Murphy, Herb Jones, and potentially Keon Brooks. So like you're looking at that group and saying we have a deficit of guys 6'6" to 6'11", 6'7" foot.
We have come a long way from Wingstop, boy.
Right. It is no longer Wingstop. So when you look at the Pelicans collection of, or lack thereof, of wings, this is the area, if you're going to do some type of consolidation trade or draft pick trade or focus, I think you just have to get bigger. So what would you be looking for out of a wing to kind of help, again, complement this roster?
Cooper Flag.
Oh, all right.
You plug him in and it fixes everything.
Gary, if the Pelicans roll out a lineup of Zion, Herb, Cooper Flag, Trey Murphy, and Measy day one, sign me up for that.
Yeah, that'll be a very interesting lineup. But yeah, I think the type of wing you're looking for is a guy that can, a 3D, just as the 3D guys that you can find, right? Like you saw, teams go in and try to add as many 3D guys as they can. It's time Pelicans get into that, right? Like get into guys who, don't necessarily need the ball in their hands, but are confident enough to take, corner threes, right? And they're, obviously that is like the most, the guy that everybody wants, right? Everybody's looking for 3-and-D players. But again, this goes back to what I was talking about when you're team building, when you're thinking about the Celtics and you're thinking about OKC Thunder, right? Like the Celtics can go out and go get Drew Holiday and go poach Derek White. And the Thunder have to go draft Aaron Wiggins and have to draft Case and Wallace and have to draft Lou Dort and do those things. Like find some of these guys that are, either in the draft or guys that you find on two-way. Like Austin Reeves was a two-way guy for the Lakers that you brought up, you gave him a chance, and lo and behold, look what has happened, right? We've seen guys time and time again with the Pelicans, right? Najee Marshall. Hell, Herb Jones got thrown into the starting lineup on some, we got to try him. And now, he's a starter and first team all defense. You find guys like that throughout the season and in some of these summer league games and these preseason games. Like you find guys around. If they're not in the draft, if you're not drafting them, find them. Like they are around, and you find these guys and bring them in. Duncan Robinson is another story that they just found in Miami. Just happened to find and bring him in, and now he's the franchise leader in 3-pointers made. Like you're not gonna find like these names, and obviously you go through free agency and if you have money and all that as well. But the guys that you're looking to find, like the names that you want to. It's going to be very difficult for the Pelicans to get those guys with not spending in the luxury tax, and then also being New Orleans, right? Not being LA and not, having Luka in LA. Everybody's going to want to go play there, and being in New York and being in Miami. You're not going to have it. So you have to find guys who are going to come in and play and play. You found, maybe you found something in Keon Brooks. Maybe that's a guy you can kind of bring in and cultivate and see where that goes. And then you're obviously going to be bringing in what I would think is at least somebody wing-ish in the draft when you think about either Coop, Ace, Dylan, and one of those guys. You're going to bring somebody in when you're talking about a wing-ish type of player. So you're going to be able to address it at some point. And obviously CJ McCollum is a trade chip now. So those are the type of, like when you're trading, those are the type of players that if I'm the Pelicans, that's the kind of guys that I'm dangling CJ's expiring contract and availability and, ability to help the team now. That's the kind of things I'm dangling that out for in return for CJ McCollum. So you want to get 3-and-D guys who can play, defense and not get beat off the dribble, but can also knock down some corner threes and some above the break threes who can play within a system and play with guys. Because again, if the Pelicans want to get to where they're going, say what you want about this season and all that, the Pelicans have a lot of talented players on their team, and they're about to add at least one more for sure. And so if you're going where you want to go, those guys are going to be there. So you're going to have to be able to be effective. I think of a guy like Derrick Jones Jr., who is just a plug and play, perfect type of role player. Those kind of guys, having those guys, PJ Washington, guys like that available. Look, those are the type of the wings that I'd be looking for if I'm the Pelicans.
You hit it on the head, right? I think you're onto something with the Keon Brooks. Again, one of the assignments of this season or last off season was, how does the team replace Najee Marshall production, right? And Larry Nance left and Dyson Daniels left and things like that. It never happened. They tried with Javonte Green. The trade for Bruce Brown probably had some of that in mind as well. I think players like Keon, bigger bodies. Like I was watching in that Clippers game. For some reason, again, the Pelicans were guard your yard and just letting Kawhi get to his spots. But when Keon Brooks was matched up against Kawhi, you didn't feel a size advantage. And all season long, I've been saying that the Pelicans feel like the little brother because they're always the smaller team. And you need more bigger guys. So what are their 3-and-D? To your point, everybody in the league is looking for 3-and-D. But you need more guys that not necessarily Larry Nance, but players who are bigger and can give you bigger bodies, right? We talk about Bobby Portis last podcast. Guys of that stature, that they're 6'8", 6'9", but they can bang so that Zion doesn't have to, right? And so that Carlo, who's slim of frame and slim of frame, doesn't have to. I think the Pelicans need to go look for players like that to add to this roster, because the size with JV and everybody else was never replaced. And so this is the area where I think the Pelicans need to do the most work. And I think giving those type of bodies around Zion is only going to be beneficial for the Pelicans roster moving forward. So with that being said, the Pelicans have 6 games left in this season. Please hit fast forward as quick as possible. The NBA draft lottery is May 12th, so right around the corner, coming up on a month away from that. That's when Pelicans fans will start perking up again. What you got left for the people as the Pelicans wrap this thing out?
Yeah, you never know what people are going through, so give someone a smile today. The draft lottery is going to be the next thing that comes up. And we're going to be doing our usual, breaking down the positions. It's going to be a fairly small draft class to look at for the Pelicans, because you're going to be probably top 4, hopefully 1.
Knock on wood, people have dropped
in
the
past. Yeah, you're right. So let's not tip the basketball guy. So we're going to be going through our draft prospects and going through that soon. As this season comes down, man, everybody who's been pulling up to these podcasts throughout this season, man, I know it's been tough. Y'all been hanging in there with us. We've been trying to keep this as light and entertaining as possible. I know it's been a tough season, but for everybody who's been rocking with us all season, man, we really appreciate y'all. Y'all are the real ones. Y'all are the reason we do get up and do these podcasts all the time. And going to be having some changes coming soon. That's going to be very, very exciting. So appreciate y'all rocking with us, and we'll be continuing to cover the team. I just want to give everybody a big thank you and appreciation for the season as it comes to a close. So as always, follow myself at Garrick_Rattler. Follow my brother at Raphael_Rattler. Follow the page at NO_basketball, no E. That's on Instagram, TikTok, wherever you get your social medias. Most importantly, subscribe to New Orleans Basketball, and we'll see you guys next time.